what needs to happen in your eyes for the Mets to be a postseason team?
Well, I'm going to mention a couple obvious ones, guys, but for very different reasons. I mean, I think we talked a lot about the improvements on the edges that this team has made. I think they need the anchors to really be there, you know, kind of the known quantities. And I mentioned that. I'm going to mention Pete Alonso and Kodai Senga. You know, and starting with Pete Alonso, I think they're in pretty good shape there for a pretty big reason. He's heading into a walk year, and Pete's got a lot of money riding on this year. And that's not to say that with his preparation and his ability, he hasn't done great every year he's been with the Mets. But I'd really count on that sort of 45, potentially 50 homer season, you know, 120 RBI type of year, because I just think with so much on the line, as we saw with Aaron Judge, who bet on himself in a walk year, I think that's going to be the same with Pete. You're going to see a very driven Pete. So that's a known quantity. Kodai Senga is a different thing. It's all about management for him. You know, the Mets did a phenomenal job helping his transition here from Japan, kept him healthy the whole year. How much can they push him to make him that ace? Because that's what they really need this year going into it.
Great points on the Stars. And I'll say this, that 83.6 win projection, making the playoffs. For Mets fans underwhelmed by this offseason, oh, the playoffs, that might sound kind of optimistic. You know what? Inside that organization, you might be surprised to hear this, I think that there's a cautious optimism that PECOTA projection is coming in a little low. Now, look, everybody knows this isn't the kind of star-studded roster as what the Mets came into last season with, a season that obviously crashed and burned. But what David Stearns has done, the strategy's become pretty clear here. How do you take a so-so roster and turn it into a contending playoff team? By run prevention and by bullpen. Now, again, last year's bullpen looked pretty good on paper, too, this time of year. So you never know what's going to happen. But as Jim was saying, they've assembled some guys with high-end stuff, guys with warts. They were affordable. Jake Diekman, for example, struggled to throw strikes for most of his career, but has really good stuff. So Jorge Lopez, a former All-Star just a couple years ago, you stockpile enough of those guys, and all of a sudden you can see with Diaz returning some pretty elite run prevention in the later innings. And the other side of run prevention is defense. David Stearns, perhaps unique among quote-unquote analytically inclined general managers, really clearly values up-the-middle defense. And he knows if you're projected an 84-win team, you win a couple more one-run games than you should, well, because of bullpen and defense, well, all of a sudden you're winning 87, 88 games, and you're right there in the wild card mix. There was a mediocre team in the World Series last year for the National League, and that was the Arizona Diamondbacks. Tip of the hat to them for making it. I'm just saying that in this era, there are ways that you can kind of patch it together without having a great roster, and that's what the Mets are doing. There are reasons to be cautiously optimistic because of that.
I would agree. Jim, what's your take?
Yeah, you know what, I understand, you know, that really from the front office side of things, you know, you really look at some of these projections and they don't factor in the defense, right? So the defense is something that usually, and that you look at all around and they're average or above in almost in a lot of positions. And so I think you can squeak out a couple of extra wins because of the D that don't show up in the projections. You know, the concerns with that is, you know, I think overall we know the starting pitching depth is there, but they don't have a ton of quality. They don't have guys that you can count on certainty with 25 starts or so or more, except for Senga. And I think that's where my big concern is. It's a mostly, I think, pitch to contact type of rotation. You better catch the ball behind him. The other thing when it comes to, you know, playing a lot of one-run games, to Andy's point, it puts a lot of pressure on the manager to handle his bullpen really well. And when you have a new manager like Carlos Mendoza, who's going to be on the job training, especially early on, you know, it's hard to kind of squeeze out that extra win or two or three when the manager is new. So puts a little extra pressure on John Gibbons, who's the bench coach, and, you know, some of those things there that you know, you look for an experienced manager and you don't worry nearly as much.
I was going to say, I think it's a good thing they're going to have Gibbons standing next to Mendoza, who can help him in those situations. Listen, for me, guys, it's all coming down to the starting pitching, right? You mentioned Kodai Senga. Can Kodai Senga build off of what we saw from him a season ago? Can he be an ace? Can Severino return to the pitcher that he was? Can Manaea give them 30 starts and a 3.5 ERA? And then you look beyond that, Jose Quintana, can he stay healthy? Can he be the guy who pitches to a 3.25 ERA? Can Hauser eat up innings and give you quality starts? There's a lot of this, exactly what we're talking about here, what Jim was speaking about. But that starting staff, to me, can McGill take a step forward this year? Can David Peterson come back? These, to me, are key questions that need to be answered before we can project the Mets are going to be a team that goes deep into the postseason. But I think 84 wins. I think that's fair.